Welcome to the Character Sheet, comicbook.com's official tabletop and fantasy YouTube page. I am Christian Hoffer, and I am joined today by a very special guest. I'm not talking about producer Pete. He's here too. I'm talking about Damien Haas. Hello, Damien.
Hello there, Christian, and I want to introduce my very special guest, producer Pete. Thank you for being here. Hi, thanks for having me back, y'all, and thanks for being along for the ride of this whole season of Sword AF.
Yeah, and Sword AF has just wrapped up its first season. So how are you feeling now that it's all in the can and it's out there for the world to see?
I am beyond excited and so proud. Every batch of episodes that we filmed very much had their own like flavor to me. Like first batch was like, we're gonna try our best, screw it, let's see how this goes. Second batch was like, okay, I remember everything, I need to keep this cohesive, and like the first stuff hadn't premiered yet, so I was like, okay, this is fine. And then it was the third batch where like everything had premiered, people were stoked on it, there was pressure, I needed to wrap up the story, it was gonna be shorter than I thought it was, like there was just so much. And to see specifically these last 3 episodes come together, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm overjoyed. And relieved, I guess. Yeah.
Well, you're overjoyed and relieved, but also your work isn't done, friend, because season two is coming. So
it is.
We'll talk about that a little bit more. You know, why give the teases for what comes next when we still have a full season to talk about?
That's a fair point.
So let's ask a couple of questions about how the season ended. The last few episodes, we actually got to see actual miniatures for the crew, but yeah. And
shout out to Stitched Crow, because they just made that and sent them, and it was,
wow! So that was
not commissioned at all. They like, honestly, it happened pretty quickly after the first episode premiered that we just got a tweet like, "Hey, look what I did! I'm that kind of talented person that can whip this up out of nowhere," you know. Those people exist, and you find them on Twitter, and we were just like, can we please show that? Like, they were just so gracious and did awesome work. So yeah.
So did seeing those miniatures change your mind about keeping this as theater of the mind? Are we going to see battle maps in season 2, or are you going to stick with a theater in the mind experience?
That's a great question. We're exploring a lot of different options right now. For me personally, left up to my own devices, I do enjoy playing with theater of the mind, right? You know, and I think at the very least, whatever adjustments we make, I probably won't be like, ooh, you're 22 feet away, you only have a range of 20. Like, I kind of want to play with the rule of cool, and I feel like that would occupy a little too much of my mind and of their mind. But something that I ran into with the cast was, you know, not everybody plays a lot of video games, not everybody plays as many board games. So what for me feels like, oh, this is supposed to be natural. Like, this is a pretty easy puzzle room, I think. In reality, you know, we all learn different ways. We all visualize things in different ways. And it was voiced by everybody, at least in some capacity, of like, hey, like, maybe I don't know what a cockatrice looks like. Or like, this room, I couldn't really keep track of it in my mind. Like, you know, and it was funny because we started doing, I think since last time we interviewed with one another, we started doing live premieres on Smosh Wednesday mornings for when the episode went up. We'd have 5,000 or 6,000 people concurrently watching as the episode premiered, and I'd be able to type along and watch people's reactions. And I'd also, so like for a specific puzzle room, I was like, I'm curious how quickly y'all get this. And a lot of the audience did understand it faster than the cast did, but they had the benefit of editing and sounds and like visuals on screen. So point is, in some capacity, I'm going to find a way to either show the cast what I'm talking about, make a map that maybe the audience doesn't have to see, and just show them, be like, you're here, you gotta get here, right? You know, whatever. You'll probably see theater of the mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, you know, visual aids is one of like the more interesting tools that you can use in D&D, and it's kind of really like a fascinating thing. I guess we're now officially to the point of like the interview stuff where we kind of like talk through different aspects of D&D and tabletop RPGs. Like,
we don't have to be coy anymore, Christian.
Yeah, well, like the visual aid stuff, it's really fascinating because it's another really cool opportunity to like present to like be creative. Like one of the really fascinating things, like talking about like the history of Dungeons and Dragons, and you guys have like the benefit because you have like all these fans, so you have all this fan art, you have wonderful fan art behind you. But you know, like in Dungeons and Dragons, like some of the earliest people playing Dungeons and Dragons, they express themselves creatively by doing art of their own characters and stuff like that.
Right.
And for like DMs, the way they get to express themselves creatively was by making these puzzles and like oh, you find a knife and pull out the knife or something like. I don't know how many knives actually get pulled out at a D&D table. I hope it's not too many.
You know what? It depends on how much danger you want at your actual table. I'm picking up what you're putting down, Christian. I got some people we can talk to.
Christian's from a really rough part of Ohio. It's a lot of knives pulled out of the table.
Columbus, rough. I hear his woof. I don't know if it's actually Columbus. I didn't dox you. I have friends in Columbus, so I just
my Twitter handle is literally Seehofer Seabus. So no hiding there where I'm from.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that brings up a very good point. On the one hand, I think it was sort of an institution in a way to be able to express yourself with that. But coming from, this generation of newer players, I think there's almost a luxury in not having to worry about that now. Like, I'm not a particularly skilled artist. And I say skilled because I know it's something that, like, you can put in the time to learn and put in the effort to learn and all this stuff. It's just not something I've done. And then I think, and nobody jump on me here, hear me out. I was playing not a D&D session with a friend. It was another TTRPG session with a friend a while back, and his roommate was like, "Hey, come here, like let's make characters. Like I just got access to this new thing called Midjourney," and I was like, "Never heard of it." And so it was an AI that you use to type in your description. It makes a character. And for my whole campaign, I was like, "That's my character right there. What cool art that I get to have." Now we obviously know it pulls from artist work, and less stoked about that. But there's always going to be changes, and I think that means our creativity got to be expressed in different ways. Whether it was through the story, through character development, through the puzzles, while also balancing our day-to-day workload. Because these actors, you gotta give them props, because we're going to be probably changing up the way we film things in the future, but it would be like, hey, we've got 2 D&D episodes, and then later you're going to hop into an Eat It or Yeet It episode where you're going to have to eat some weird food, and then after that, we got to try not to laugh. And so keeping up energy for that, like anything that can be taken off their plates, like please do, That being said, I will bring a knife to the table.
And there we go. Promise number 1 for season 2. Let's talk a little bit about how this season ended, because it's kind of awesome.
Thank you.
The crew ended up with a headquarters of sorts, and it's like a mimic castle. Talk us through how'd you come up with that?
There was a lot of different moving pieces, much like the mimic castle. Some of them were logistical, some of them were purely creative. This whole season has been a very big learning process for me in like letting other people's ideas. Like I sort of have, do you ever experience this where like, if you're going to go clean a space, like a room, and someone goes like, "Hey, you need to clean that room." You're like, "I can't do it anymore. Like I was about to do it and now I can't." That's kind of how I'm wired. So it used to be that way with ideas too. So I'd be a little bit afraid of like letting other people hop in, especially because, with Smosh, I was always, helping write sketches and pitch things, but my vibe didn't always work with what we were going for. So when something would work out, I was very like precious with it, So we're talking about how to end the season, and we started out with only 6 episodes, which is why I was like, okay, we're gonna have a couple of set missions that we're gonna do and then come back, right? From there, whatever. A couple episodes were added. So I perhaps arrogantly or naively thought like, okay, we've got 9 episodes. We'll probably make it to like 11, 12. So I had a whole extra mission planned that involved dungeons and puzzles and things like that, because I wanted to bring in that very classic element of D&D, which they had not really explored yet in this game. So the way I had planned it originally is fight the witch. There's a mimic castle. Mimic castle is final boss, right? And then job is done, you move on from there. What ended up happening was, when I learned that there were fewer episodes than I'd hoped, and I was like, but I had this whole other mission, and I really want to explore some dungeon stuff. Alex, who's our AP, our associate producer on games, was like, well, is there a way to get them to like, I don't think I told him about the dungeon. I think he just said something like, is there a way to do the third mission sort of where they're at right now? And I was like, well, that would mean the castle is the dungeon, and then the castle is the dungeon, then the castle is the dungeon. And so like, as the mimic castle's moving, I'm like, the rooms would be moving too. Of course they would. Of course they would. And then I'm like, well, now where's it going? Okay, it's going, and then it'll have to settle somewhere. Where does it end up? And that all just sort of informed this next little like thread pull. And also one of the cool things, I don't know if it's been announced, but I don't think it's too crazy of a thing to say. Because this feels very special to me, because like the company believes in, I say the company like it's corporate, Smosh as a whole believes in Sword AF a lot, and through that I feel like it's in me too, and I feel very happy about that. So they've brought in some assistant writers to help me plot out different potential points that could happen, some goals for the season. That again, there's a lot of looseness. We don't want to lose the ability to just have the cast drive their own story, but like they're experienced in the space, and they know what they're doing, and at the very least they're great for me to like, as somebody I have DM'd this season, and that's the only thing I've ever DM'd. Like, I have a lot to learn. I watched the finale and I'm like, oh god, that should have been insight. Like, I've been playing Baldur's Gate, that should have been insight. Why'd I have perception? That's so stupid. Anyway, I'm talking to them about ending the season, and it's the first like interview where it's like, they're gonna maybe be brought in, let's see how you work together. And I was like, okay, here's how I'm thinking of ending the season. There's this big bad that I wanted more time to plan out, or I wanted them to ask about him a little more. I don't think I planted enough seeds. I don't think I gave enough time for that. I want him to show up and be the big bad, but it kind of feels like that would be a big old surprise. Like, it'd just be like out of nowhere. And they were like, is there anyone else that could be the big bad? And I was like, well, there's this other person that I guess we can speak spoilery, because hopefully at this point someone has watched the finale. If you haven't, pause, come back, watch the finale. They were like, is there someone else? And I'm like, well, I considered having, someone that they trust a lot betray them. There is Gunthar, who is also much stronger. He's strong enough to be like a big bad for them, but it would be a bit of a character turn, and I have other plans for him and all these different things. And they were like, well, you know how you have someone show up out of nowhere and make him very like visibly the big bad. Could he kill someone? And I was like, oh my god, if he kills that other person who has been their mentor, that would be huge. And I looked through my notes and all the things I had planned for him and for the other people, and at least in terms of like background story, not like, and now you say this and you say that, but yeah. And I was like, this all still works. I'm gonna go home and sit on this and think if this can still happen. And that ended up being the choice that I went with. And so just having the smallest suggestion really let me run with it. So the ending was still very much what I wanted it to be, but the specifics on how it happened was a combination of cast choices, my hopes and dreams, and letting a couple suggestions come in from some very smart people, whether it was the writers or Alex, the AP. Like, it was a great combo.
Speaking of this, still somewhat undead Mimic Castle that they sort of walked away with at the end of the season.
Yes.
They're trying to clear their names as they've been due to that swerve we're talking about, where, spoilers, as we've said before, Krungdar shows up and it turns out that he's been trying to make a villain because the world needs a villain.
Right.
And it's going to be the four of them. And it seems like the season ends with their new purpose being to clear their name. Do you think that will all be hindered by the fact that they're living in a walking active crime scene?
That's a great question. And it's one that I have a very direct answer to. That is for later, because we've had these episodes filmed for a little while. I've had a lot of opportunities to think about a lot of different things, and I'll tell you what. So we have a long notes process at Smosh, and our editors are incredible. Shout out to Andre and Kevin, who did the lion's share of the work on all of the D&D episodes. I have seen all of these episodes so many times, and I write down every little thing that pops up because I'm like, ooh, that could get paid off, or ooh, a character might want to know that. They said that in the moment, maybe they forgot. I want to bring that up to them. especially because our actors were newer to playing the game. So most of them were newer to playing the game. I wanted to be like, hey, just a reminder, you said this thing, don't forget. So sorry, what was the exact question? God, I'm spacing.
Well, it was sort of like, so they've their goal is to now clear themselves, but they're living in the thing that did all of the killing and the rampaging and the such.
So what's really cool is I just met with the new writing help to sort of run a lot of my ideas by them, where I sort of want the season to go. They came in with their own pitches and so many things already lined up, which was just like, oh, this is great. So we like bounced off of each other's ideas. But I will say, in terms of telling a story, that's not going to be a problem. I have a couple different ways I really want to explore that. Was that?
I felt it was so great. Like that is the chaos that can sometimes sweep through that party. It was so perfect for like in there. You know, you're wanting for murder. Let's go build a house inside the chalk outline.
Thank you so much. Yeah, right. It is. Yeah. Well, they do what they can. And I'll say this too, just to clarify on the question you had asked earlier about like Krungdar being like, you know, the whole point the whole time was to turn them into villains. So the way I had it set up in my mind was what he wants is a functioning economy of need and then the need being met. So, you know, it's not necessarily about turning them into villains. It's like, let's send out some woefully underprepared people to spruce up this forest. And then because they're woefully unprepared and just not quite the right people for the job, they might start a forest fire. But also you luckily have a firefighting company, which you then get to employ. So like, be it the Turtle Dragon, be it the Mimic Castle, like there was a world, you know, had they made different choices, had we had a longer season, maybe the Mimic Castle didn't get defeated. Maybe it was something that was just out in the world doing things. And, you know, it wouldn't have to be necessarily the biggest deal of like, there's a Mimic Castle, everyone run. But like they'd get to a new town and be like, did you hear about, you know, this other town that you were supposed to go to? Oh yeah, it got leveled by the Mimic Castle. It's like, oh, oops, the choices you made and the thing you didn't clean up in the moment had an effect. So, you know, that was more of just needing it to be fully 9 episodes because yeah, the monsters were supposed to be the villains, you know?
Yeah, well, they still had, I mean, not them directly, but their actions have sort of declared a two-front war on this entire continent, where now they've got a rampaging, you know, dragon turtle out there on the coastline, turtle dragon, and then you've got, you know, the interior being crushed by the Mimic Castle.
Yeah. But and you know, that is something to deal with too, because it's like, you know, defeating the witch and all that stuff, which is what woke up the castle itself, you know, that did lead to the castle rampaging, but like, is there any way they could have known that, you know?
Oh no, and that's the best part of it. None of it's their fault, but that's what makes it such a good story, is it's they're well-intentioned people who are facing some consequences that no one could have foreseen, except for, in a way, Krungdar. And because we're from comicbook.com, Krungdar is sort of like the economic version of Ozymandias in The Watchmen. And they're kind of like the interstellar squids just being dropped on the earth that is this game.
And I love that you said that. Thank you. Because I wanted to do two things really differently. Not super differently, because all of these things have been explored before. But two things that I see for villains a lot, whether it's D&D or fantasy in general, is either they want power to rule the world or something like that, which is the classic, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Krungdar wants a return to a sense of power, you know, from the Age of Heroes, and to see the world work in a way that it did work before and could work. You know, in his mind, as with all villains, he's not a villain. He's like, I'm fixing some stuff. Like, that's why I started out the season with like a bunch of mercenaries waiting around a job board. Like, that's the first scene, a bunch of mercenaries waiting around a job board. And the second one is posted, like people are jumping over each other. It's like, times are tough. And this used to be the main thing. You were all coal miners and now we don't use fossil fuels anymore. So what do you do? So that's thing number one. And then thing number two is you usually see a lot of big bad villains being very magical in a specific way. Like they are a lich, or they are this powerful sorcerer that found a scroll or the amulet or whatever, and they can just blast you with their hands. My thought was like, what if Krungdar is just a really, really strong, seasoned like war hero. Like he's not powerful because he found the armor of whatever. He's just strong and experienced, and his ideas aren't necessarily incorrect for everyone. It's just the way he goes about them makes him villainous. Those are the two things that really excited me, and so I'm really glad that you said the Ozymandias thing, because that's a really cool comparison.
Krungdar's superpower is supply side economics.
Yeah, I was also hoping it wasn't too like heavy-handed, you know, like because you know when Fernie as a joke was just like, what if this is the real villain holding up
and punching the gold? That was great as well.
As a joke, and I was just sort of there as the DM, like, yeah, what if it is, like, you know, just symbolism, you know. But
so season 2, obviously,
yes,
still in the planning phases, but we've already kind of gotten like a couple of we know who the big bad is, and stuff like that. But what can people look forward to in season 2? Like what do you have planned? Tell us what you know and what you have planned, sir.
Yeah. So here's some things that I can definitely tell you. This first season was us flying by the seat of our pants. I did the best job I could learning how to DM on the fly, checking in with friends who've done it, but like doing the best I could. The actors had very little, if they weren't someone like Chance with a lot of experience, they had very little chance to practice because we had undergone like management shifts and times were crazy and the schedule was all, bonkers. So we had like one session 0. That's it. So I'm very proud of what we've done with the first season. If that is what we did with the first season, think about what it's going to be like with more experienced players, more opportunity for expansion, me knowing what I'm doing a little more and having people help me keep track of things and bounce off ideas and really flesh out where things can go and if that actually works or if that is counter to a different idea. Like I planted so many seeds through the first season that either didn't get noticed or didn't get paid off or things like that. And when, sharing it with these writers, like they're excited and I'm excited too. I'll even say this is one little teaser and I'll just leave it at that. I wrote down possibilities for like locations, characters, storylines, enemies, like, the way we can go about fights. That like the fight with Gunthar was not a physical battle. It was like basically a skill check in persuasion of like how much can you talk your way into having this person remember what they truly believe in. So more things like that. But one thing that I wrote down was like for one or two characters, I was like, given their character development, multi-classing into something different wouldn't be too crazy. In fact, it might really help them. And then I met with these writers and they were like, we wanted to run something by you. For a couple of these characters, multi-classing specifically into this thing would be really great. And I was like, the My Paper, look at the My Paper, look. And it was just, we're so on the same quite literal page that I think character development is going to be a really cool thing to watch because at the end of the day, these folks were actors first. And now we can play with more comfort. I think that's basically it. And they time travel to the future. No, I'm kidding. I don't think I can get more specific than that, or rather don't want to, because I'm excited to, now that we're doing these live premieres, which I hope carry on to the second season, watching audience reactions is just like, when you think about the prince not being the beast, but everyone thinks they figured out that the beast is the prince and they know, but it's not. And like all these reveals happening and switching in the moment, like it's like candy. So I don't want to rob myself of that selfishly.
So speaking of traveling to the future, talk about a segue.
That's actually quite a good segue.
Thank you.
We're kind of always doing it at a set pace. Go on.
Time is linear.
A flat circle, I'd say.
So Sword AF isn't the only thing that you've been up to, sir. You also appear in a little indie game called Starfield
with barely 10 million players.
Yeah, I have a little game called Starfield. can you tell us a little bit about that? You know, not very often that we get to talk to a Starfield, you know, a star of Starfield.
Oh, stop. No, that was a really cool and emotional experience for me because I've been a voice actor for 12 years now, maybe going on 13. And you know, I've been working all that time, but mainly the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's been a heavier amount of work than previously. Like I was really just sort of starting to find my legs back then. And so right at the same time I started on what would turn into Fortnite, I got another booking for what would turn into Starfield. And that was about 6 years ago. Minus 1 month basically, but I went back and I looked for my original call sheet and it was 6 years ago. And so as a voice actor, even if I didn't have, you know, things to talk about, people would be like, oh, I'm in this anime and I'm the lead in this game. What are you working on? I'd be like, stuff, you'll see it later. And I always knew Starfield was somewhere on the horizon. I'm sure there's a joke. I'm not going to make it. But I always knew it was there and like, you know, waiting for me. And so I recorded pre-pandemic and then mid-quarantine when I'm in a closet with my good quality mic, but still a closet. And then, you know, afterwards, and all these different projects happened in the meantime. And it was, you know, I started working on it very briefly after I joined Smosh. And so I got to sort of look at it as this bookend of like, look at all the things you've done in these past 6 years. And it's been the best 6 years of my life. And so to see it, you know, come out and for people to actually enjoy it, that's just bonus. You know, I will say I was worried about one thing with it, which turned out to either not be an issue in general or people don't care enough to say anything. So I'm trusting all the audience with this information. Don't be mean. When I booked it originally, it was at a point when I've never really had training as a voice actor other than one like 2-hour coaching session on like, how do you do video game noises? What's it sound like to get shot? What's it sound like to get electrocuted? And that's carried me forever. And so it was at a point where I was like, you know what? Games are getting even more realistic. I need to like bring my acting down a little bit. I want to try this more realistic. Like I want to try this guy a little more like, you know, even if it doesn't sound too, like there's too much behind it, like he's just doing his job, right? And obviously everything's worked under a code name and the character's under a code name and the location's under a code name. Everything's a code name. So in my brain, I'm like, I'm a construction worker. This is great. So I tried my best to be like, let's make this as natural as possible. And I end up booking it. And so I bring that into the first session and I'm like, all right, I'm blue collar. Like, you know, I'm doing this, you know, if anything, I'm going to add in just like a little bit of like a blue collar Northeastern affectation to his voice. Right. And so, and that worked out fine. You know, people who have played the intro, which is some of the earlier stuff I recorded, have told me they're like, hey, you know, I'm from Pennsylvania. Like you sound like you're like a rural Pennsylvania, like worker. And I'm like, awesome. That's great. But, you know, I would come back a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later. Like there weren't too many sessions in a row. There'd be little gaps as, you know, more game existed or they would need to make some changes. And I would listen back. They'd be like, let's play back some of what you did before. And I'd be like, yeah. Sounds like I have a bit of an affectation in my voice. They're like, yeah, you got a bit of a Northeast accent there. I'm like, great. And as I would continue on in the sessions, I'd notice more creeping in and I'd be like, hey, was that too much? Was that like way more than I did before? And people would be like, you're great. You're golden. It's perfect. I'd be like, great, awesome, cool, sick, dope. And then by the end of it, like, I feel like I'm doing like this all the time. And I'm like, you know, you can clearly tell there's more of like I'm barely saying my R's. And it's like, okay, is this Boston? Is it like New York? Like, where's it coming from? And so I was just like, oh my God, over the course of 6 years, it's going to sound insane. Because to me, it's 6 years of growth. And to you, it's going to be like, hi, how's it going? Can I grab that for you? Yeah, let me just take you back over here. It's not a problem, boss, you know. And I was just so worried it would be disjointed. And it wasn't. And that's all I cared about.
That's great. Because I have not gone back to the after the second time you meet Heller. You can obviously go back to that planet. I haven't gone yet, but now I want to go back and just see if he's like, oh yeah, just park your spaceship in Space Harvard Yard and just, you know, have a good time out here, buddy. You got to go Goodwill hunting. How about them apples? just
tell you what,
now
Pete,
I want that to be
solid,
the case.
If you do that, can you just please not tell me? If it does sound like that, just don't let me know. I'll find it out on stream because I'm going to stream it when I'm done with Baldur's Gate, which is whenever in the future.
Yeah,
like
you know, so
we're never really done
now.
with Baldur's Gate.
We're never done. Baldur's Gate is never done with us, Pete.
No,
That's
I've never gotten past Act 2 because I've restarted it so many times.
Wow. I'm in Act 2 now with my stream. And in fact, I am streaming it directly after we do this interview. And it's kind of ruined my life in a fun way. Because I used to do 2.5 hour streams and I'd finish and be like, well, folks, it's 9 or 10 p.m. I got to get going and get to bed and have some dinner and maybe exercise. I don't know. And now I've been doing 6 hour streams, not by choice. And I'm just like, well, y'all, it's midnight 30. I forgot to eat today. I'll see you next time. And then I'm going to add a stream the next day because I'm addicted. So it's just...
Like, I'd like to go to bed, but Will just asked Karlak about proper horn care, and now I've got to stay up for another hour.
You mean my waifu, my love? You know her?
I think she's everyone's waifu at this point.
She's so wholesome.
Karlak is one of the best characters in that entire game by a mile.
Well, she's like... They do a wonderful job of like conveying with her. This is also a spoiler if you are not super far in Karlak's story, but I will just say like they do a wonderful job in... Are you good with spoilers?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
No.
I am only in Act 2, so I don't know anything fully, but I think they do a wonderful job of, in a fantasy way, conveying what it's like for someone to have an illness that they believe to be terminal and how that might affect their life. I'm like, what a cool way to tell this story. You know, it's so fantasy, but so not. And that's why I think like her disposition on life is one of the more fascinating ones compared to some of the other characters you see. Everybody's got their stuff, obviously. But,
Yeah, we also have a soft spot for Asterion because we interviewed Neil Newbon when he...
Oh, cool.
And like, and also, it's hard to... It's in Act 3, so I've only seen it briefly, but like, I can't get mad at Orin. At like, she's in the trailer. It's not a spoiler at all. Just so like the big bad lady from the trailer, I can't get mad at her anymore because we interviewed Maggie Robb, her voice actor. And also, like, she and Neil were like the two nicest people.
So
we don't think we've ever met like a bad voice actor doing this gig. Like, they're always the nicest. We did Yuri Lowenthal. We talked to him for
I've
Phase
heard
0.
that he's an angel.
He was delightful, and he just came on out of nowhere and did like an hour Marvel podcast with us.
Yeah. When I first started voice acting, and I talked to my agent about like wanting to learn and wanting to grow, but not having the money for classes or anything because I was broke as a joke. They were like, you need a mentor. And I was like, okay. And they were like, you should reach out to Yuri Lowenthal. He's really nice, and I think he might want to take you under his wing. And I just had too much social nerves to do that. But I still think about that sometimes. I'm like, what if I was mentored by Yuri Lowenthal from like 19? Like, but the fact that my agent, my very experienced, very good agent was like, hit up Yuri, he'll do it, is like, just speaks to his character. Yeah. Like, you can't keep people fooled that long, you know? So,
but speaking of before we get out of here, speaking of voice acting, you had another voice acting thing you would like to talk about.
I did have that. Thank you, Pete. Usually when you voice act for things, you just wait until it comes out, like 6 years for Starfield or a couple of years for most things. I have been the voice of a character for a game that's being localized that is supposed to release sometime next year. And I just finished recording that. Like, excuse me, sorry for the burps. I just finished recording that, like, well, I don't want to say how recently. People are weird about their process. But the localization person who's really passionate about it was like, yeah, you'll probably be able to talk about it when the trailer actually comes out. Oh, I will say this. Sorry, this is another Starfield thing. Switching right back.
No problem.
One of the difficult things as a voice actor is not being able to break your non-disclosure agreements when things start to come out. So if a trailer comes out, I didn't watch any of the Starfield trailers, but people started hitting me up online and being like, hey man, I just watched this first like gameplay preview. Is that you? And I don't respond to it. And if it's on stream, my mods know that if anyone's asking about anything voice acting for me, their comment gets swatted down and they put up a thing that says like, Damien is under non-disclosure agreements for most of these things. If there's anything he's able to talk about, he definitely would have announced it on Twitter. Otherwise, stay tuned. It's like, it's polite, but it's just like, even me saying yes or no or whatever, it's too much of an answer, right?
Yeah.
But this localization person was like, yeah, you can probably talk about it when the trailer comes out, which Starfield was a nightmare because early access was a week before I was able to talk about it. And I got confirmation. I could not talk about it when it was in early access. So people are streaming it. My name is in the credits. People sent me screenshots of like my name in the credits being like, this is you. And I had to go, nuh-uh. And that's all I can do. So anyway, point being, the person for this other game was like, the trailer's coming out. You could probably talk about it when the trailer comes out. Trailer dropped today because people started tweeting at me. And I was like, no way, this soon. And then I hit up the localization person. They were like, I got word you can do it. And I was like, I'm going to need an email from your marketing team, please. And so from her and from the marketing team and the marketing supervisor and the PR manager, I am the protagonist in The Legend of Heroes Trails Through the Daybreak. I am very honored to be joining the Trails series. My character's name is Van Arkwright. He's dope as hell. I'm really excited. I have already bought as much merch as I could from Japan of his character before, on eBay before it sells out, and I've just been hiding it in spaces that don't have cameras anywhere near. I bought like a replica of his sword. He's awesome. He was so much fun to play. He's very against type in terms of like JRPG protag boys that I've played before. And I will probably not be matching his hair because his hair matches exactly what I had before I went purple. So I was like, I can't go back. But huge shout out to NIS for having me and trusting me with this role. And that's why I keep looking at this. I'm just, because I did not prep for this. There was no PR. I was just like, actual email. It is NIS America, and this is Legend of Heroes Trails Through the Daybreak is the full game name, and they stuck with Van Arkwright. Good, nothing changed. Like, yeah. So
that's awesome. And for people that don't know,
thank you.
Because Tales is a gigantic, it's on par with Final Fantasy in Japan. And it is now in the last 5 years started to crack the North American, European market. But the Tales series, or the Trails series, is very much like the Tales series or Final Fantasy. It's this 20 plus year history franchise, and that's awesome. That's amazing. I can't wait to play that.
It was wild to me, and I know you probably have to run as I do as well, but when I first showed up, the last one that got released was Trails into Reverie, I believe, which had it was 50 playable characters, and throw a rock, you'll hit a friend of mine that was a voice actor in that game. And I was like, oh, cool, I booked one of these roles. I was at VidCon this year when I got a call back for this role, and I was like, I need to drive home and do this. I'm gonna just drive home and do this. And so I knocked out that, the retakes and all that stuff, left. And when I booked it, I was really stoked. I was really glad I went home. And then when I start working with the studio, which was awesome, by the way, my God, I hope I work with them again. They were so cool. They were like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm going to be one of 50 characters again. This is Trails. I can't wait to explore my character story. And they're like, so you're our guy. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? He's like a real guy's guy, or like, and they're like, no, you're you main character, whole thing. And I was like, what? We just got a couple hours today. They're like, yeah, you're going to be working on this for months. So I was like, okay, awesome, cool. Like, thank God I couldn't hype that up in my brain first. So anyway, I'm honored to be trusted both by the studio and NIS America.
I just looked it up to make sure my brain wasn't playing tricks on me. But yeah, we'll also be covering this later because Legend of Heroes Trails of Destiny is going to be their first tabletop game in 2024 as well.
Oh, no way.
Oh, wow.
It's officially confirmed. And I had to check. I've heard it in the back of my head. But yeah, Trails of Destiny is going to be released, expected in 2024 for their tabletop version, the TTRPG.
Nice.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
Well, and so now we know what Sword AF Season 3 will use as the game engine.
Christian, be cool.
The Rise of Van Arkwright, Season 3.
Yeah, I'm slowly just like grafting myself onto Smosh like a parasite, and just like being like, oh, we did another like Fire Emblem crossover. I'm like, yeah. Like, it's just, I don't know. Now we're playing Starfield for 18 hours.
It's like Smosh just is Starfield now. That's, just video we just pivot. It's all Starfield all the time.
I used to be the host. Now Smosh is the host and I the parasite.
Okay, we should wrap things up. But before we do, is any final words for the viewers?
Absolutely. I don't want to forget this. This is okay. So you may have noticed my background switched halfway through. Shout out to Odd Jacobson, our artist, for so many things during the series. They did a wonderful job, and really, it was the least I've ever had to give notes on anything. I was like, this is how I see it in my brain, and they're like, oh, the exact thing you pictured. Here you go. Shout out also to _E_Mart on Twitter, who had the background that I was using for the entire beginning of this. It was a bit of fan art that we found that was just incredible, and it's one of my favorite pieces. I think I'm going to make it my computer background. So to all the fans who watched, whether you made fan art or not, thank you for coming along for this ride. To anybody else who's interested and somehow made it through this interview without watching season 1, watch season 1, but even if you don't, I'm going to make it accessible in season 2 for anybody, so you don't have to feel like you got to play catch up. Shout out to the cast who worked their butts off. Shout out to the crew who is always going above and beyond for these long shoots, willing to offer up ideas. Shout out to everyone on Smosh who knew D&D and offered up some sort of insight, roll for insight on how different things would work if I ever had a question in the room. Spencer, the director, Alex, the AP, Smosh management in general for believing in this, and especially enough to give it a season 2. Thank you to y'all for continuing to interview me on all this stuff. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. Oh, Beans, I will. Andre and Kevin, the editors. Oh God, that's it for now.
Well,
okay.
And on that note, we will see you again for season 2. Thank you, as always, for appearing on the show.
My pleasure.
And thank you, everyone, for watching. And, as always, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.
Do it.